The Gloriana said, by ThebeMoon. Read by LMX Mabella. Chapter 38. Slug Club, Part 2. Malfoy shifted smoothly to stand between Hermione and Vasil, pinning the vampire against the wall. Slytherin's eyes shone in the candlelight like a cat's. Vasil cringed. "That's enough, Draco," Hermione said calmly. "We were just talking. Vasil has been perfectly respectful." "Well, perhaps he could be more respectful from a further distance," Malfoy said, now employing a polite tone that somehow was even worse. The vampire began to tremble. "Draco, you're scaring him." "Really?" Malfoy said softly. "Vasil, is it? You know my family, I presume. Be aware that I hold this witch's life infinitely higher than my own." Vasil's shaking intensified. The vampire was directly on the candelabra now, its light falling on his long dark hair, his paper-white skin even paler than Malfoy's. It was Malfoy who stood in the shadows, eyes still shining with reflected light. "Draco, this isn't necessary, and Slughorn won't like you terrifying his guests." "I don't care what Slughorn likes or doesn't like." Malfoy didn't take his eyes off Vasil. "I care that this vampire understands the consequences if he touches you in any way." Hermione huffed in frustration. "Stop making a fool out of yourself. His name is Vasil Montesque, and he is a friend of Kingsley who is sponsoring his stay in the country." She turned to the vampire with a smile. "Vasil, it was a pleasure to meet you. It might be best if you went back to Slughorn now."
"As you wish, Princessa."
Vasil bowed and stepped noiselessly across the floor, headed directly for Slughorn. Hermione turned back to Malfoy, who had stepped out of the shadows and looked ready to explode.
"Princessa!"
he hissed. "Princess, it's a bit of a nickname," she admitted.
"A nickname?"
Malfoy closed his eyes for a second, obviously trying to calm himself. Then he opened them again, and Hermione wasn't sure he had succeeded. His eyes were like grey glass on the verge of shattering.
"I cannot leave you alone for a moment," he hissed. "I arrive a little late to one party, and you're in the shadows with a vampire?"
Hermione looked out at the room. "Vasil can be quite useful." The vampire was huddled close to Slughorn now, who looked a bit nervous. "You know," she continued, her gaze returning to Malfoy, "I've seen advertisements in the Prophet for the Society for the Tolerance of Vampires. They coordinate human blood donations for—"
"You must be joking,"
Malfoy snarled.
"You are not giving blood to some sodding spoof of vampires."
"I think you're completely overreacting."
"Oh, really, Hermione? You do?"
His voice hardened.
"Well, let me tell you, when the Voldemort was in my home, I saw a few vampires. I saw what they did to people, to muggles, to women. So forgive me if I don't agree. I don't believe I'm overreacting when you suddenly adopt pet vampires who give you nicknames. He knows the smell of your blood now, and he won't forget. He'll imagine the taste."
"Draco," Hermione said. He couldn't hear her. His fists were clenched, and his eyes swept the room, obviously looking for a vampire to throttle. "Draco!" He looked at her. She placed her hands over his and drew them chest-high between them. "I am fine, Draco," she said softly, looking up into his eyes. "He never touched me. I am fine. I am perfectly fine. I am exactly the same person I was before. I am fine."
"Is everything all right?"
asked a voice, Zabini's. He and Ginny stood beside them. Malfoy blinked and turned away as Hermione released his hands. "Yes, thank you. Draco found me talking alone with Slughorn's vampire." Ginny gasped. Blaise looked grim.
"Do you know how dangerous that was?"
"Yes," she sighed. "I won't do it again."
"Thank you for making such a sacrifice,"
said Malfoy, scowling. "Slughorn? Slughorn didn't leave me in this corner with him," Hermione said. "That was my idea. I didn't want to be interrupted." Ginny gasped again, and Blaise moaned.
"She didn't want to be interrupted?"
Blaise repeated.
"Hermione!"
Ginny was shocked.
"I feel sorry for you, mate,"
Blaise told Malfoy.
"You'll never know a quiet moment again."
"All right, that's quite enough of that." Hermione glowered at Blaise as she took Malfoy's hand.
Come along, Draco,
she said bossily, pulling him towards the dance floor. The prospect of dancing cheered Malfoy slightly, as she'd hoped it would, at least enough to distract him from plots of vampiricide. He held her a little too close, his lips brushing her temple and hair, but she could feel his heart pounding even now, so she allowed it. His hand at her waist felt warm through her dress, thin cloth beneath her long curls, sending tremors to her core. Her heart began to pound. The adrenaline from talking with Bazil and then watching such a dark Draco had her trembling now.
"You're all right,"
he murmured.
"I wasn't afraid,"
she said quickly. He chuckled.
"No, not you, Hermione."
She found herself leaning her cheeks against his robes, overlaid with dark blue velvet tonight. The sensation was now familiar from their broomstick flight. Then slowly, not saying a word, that same safe feeling surrounded her like she was wrapped in his magic.
"You look lovely this evening,"
Malfoy said, his voice calmer. His hand left her waist to stroke her hair.
"But you should be wearing my gift."
She looked up at him. "I think there are enough Malfoy diamonds here tonight."
"Astoria."
There was a wealth of contempt behind those 4 syllables. Both looked over at the younger Greengrass, still holding court, now talking to Ernie and Cormac. Slytherin's eyes glittered back coldly like her diamonds. Malfoy flawlessly kept time to the music, although his thoughts were plainly somewhere else.
"I truly wanted her once,"
he said pensively.
"Did I really expect so little?"
"That necklace," Hermione swallowed. "Was it yours?" He looked down at her, his eyes faintly reflecting the blue of his robes.
"No, that's Mother's work. Now I know why Astoria skipped Quidditch practice today to visit Hogsmeade."
Hermione looked over at Astoria again. She couldn't see that crooked M in diamonds from across the room, but she knew it was there. "Draco," she said, "that necklace isn't just a string of diamonds. It's obviously a Malfoy family heirloom, and you are head of the Malfoy family, so your mother can't." She trailed off. "No," she said. Malfoy nodded, his face grim. "Draco, it isn't." Malfoy stopped dancing and guided her gently towards a nearby sofa, drawing her down beside him. Hermione clenched her hands together on her lap and looked out over the party once more. Blaise and Ginny standing close together drinking champagne. Bazil still dodging Slughorn's steps. Ernie boring some poor girl half to death. Neville, she noticed, had made good his escape. "It was hers, wasn't it?" Hermione asked, her fingers rubbing the ridges on her left arm. A large warm hand closed over hers, halting the motion.
"Yes, that diamond choker was Mother's interest gift from Father."
"I'm that much of a threat," Hermione said. Her voice sounded low and breathy to her own ears. "I'm so horrible that she would risk her own."
"It was likely Father's idea."
Malfoy's voice was cold.
"I'd say he'd ordered her to give the necklace to Astoria."
Hermione looked at him, wide-eyed.
"Yes, you're that much of a threat, Hermione. And yes, he hates you, and all Muggleborns that much. You're surprised by that?"
No, she supposed she wasn't. That was a terrible thing to force your mother to do. Malfoy shrugged. He was surprisingly calm about all this, but then, after the whole Voldemort houseguest thing, probably nothing surprised him about his parents anymore.
"She rarely wore it."
His eyes narrowed as he looked over at Astoria.
"Mother is too good for such a gaudy, vulgar piece."
His lip curled in distaste.
"Perhaps it has found a more suitable owner."
"Does the necklace have any, Hermione coughed, properties?" His looks of distaste deepened.
"Mother would never say, but Father implied the jewels contained charms of submission."
Hermione felt sick. Malfoy tried to pull his hand away, but she put hers over it, holding it in place. "You're not your father, Draco."
"I know," he said tensely. "I would never use it on her, even to—"
She grinned suddenly. "You couldn't anyway. Remember, your mother gave her the necklace." Malfoy blinked, looking rather shocked, then met her eyes. He snickered lightly, and she couldn't help joining in until they were both shaking with suppressed laughter.
I don't think Father considered that,"
he said, still chuckling. Set an arm around her waist, Astoria was looking at them suspiciously, and Malfoy gave her a little wave. "Draco!" Hermione pulled his arm back down, but she was still smiling. Malfoy sobered slightly. "I must speak to her. Astoria's little fairy tale has to end. I can't imagine what she's saying now." Hermione sighed. She had to tell him, but he wasn't going to like it. "She's positioned me as your fun on the side before marriage." She gritted her teeth. "Like your father used to have." He nodded. "They're all trying to force my hand." His arm around her waist tightened, drawing her closer, and she could feel his breath on her ear. "I told Astoria it wouldn't work," she murmured, "that nobody could make you do anything." "Oh, I'm sure you did, but this isn't entirely true now, is it?" Malfoy whispered back. "Are you going to make me apologize to the vampire now?" "No," Hermione said. She knew a lost cause when she saw it, and she'd sworn off making people apologize anyway. It always ended in tears, usually Hermione's. Malfoy's rich cologne was swirling through her senses. She had to get off the sofa. The music thankfully ended, and Hermione pulled away slightly to clap along with everyone else. Darkhorn raised his goblet. "Thank you all for coming to my little affair," he said, taking a hearty gulp. He was wobbling a bit on his legs, and Ernie and Cormac quickly stepped up to help support him. "Have a wonderful evening." Hermione and Malfoy stood and followed the other guests, moving toward the only exit door. A small bottleneck developed, and Blaise and Ginny joined them standing near a silver tapestry. Then Astoria swept up. "Draco!" she said delightedly. She kissed him on both cheeks, lingering slightly before stepping back. "I've been looking for you." Malfoy smiled back thinly. "Does this mean we're friends again, Astoria?" Saria waved a gloved hand, dismissing any disagreement the two of them may ever possibly had. "We never stopped being friends," she purred, touching the diamond at her throat. "Splendid," Malfoy said. "I wondered, Draco, if we could speak a moment," Astoria said, her hand on his arm. "Tomorrow, perhaps," Malfoy said. "Tonight, Blaise and I are going to escort these two Gryffindors back to their tower." "I'm sure they know the way," Astoria said, giving Hermione and Ginny the most cursory of glances. Hermione couldn't help but glare back. That witch had a lot of nerve traipsing up to Malfoy and his mother's jewels, demanding his attention. "Yes, but that wouldn't be very gentlemanly, would it?" Blaise said, putting an arm around Ginny. "I would think that Theodore would much prefer—" "Well, Theo isn't here, so I will escort Hermione instead," Malfoy said easily. Hermione understood what Malfoy was doing, but she didn't like playing the timid maiden afraid to walk alone in the big bad castle. She glanced at Ginny, who was beginning to shift impatiently as well, and glower at Blaise. "Oh, look, the doorway's clear," Malfoy said. "Good night, Astoria." Taking Hermione's elbow, he led her out the door, with Blaise and Ginny following. "Stop grabbing me, Blaise," Ginny grumbled. "That was revoltingly medieval." "But quite symbolic," Blaise said. "Draco had to do it that way." Hermione and Ginny relaxed once they emerged from the dungeons, the four of them chatting lightly as they climbed a staircase after staircase. No one mentioned the vampire or Astoria, and even Malfoy unwound a bit, holding Hermione's hand lightly and running a thumb over her palm. The women ended the evening at the portrait hall, drawing a slight scowl from Blaise, but Malfoy simply nodded and gave Hermione an intent look before wishing them good night and pulling Blaise away. "So, who goes first?" Ginny asked once they had settled by the fireplace, with hot chocolate sitting on the sofa of significant conversations. Hermione sighed. "I'm ending things with Theo." "Because of Malfoy?" "Yes." Hermione blew on her chocolate to cool it, although the warm mug felt good in her hands. It felt good to say it out loud. Merlin, help her. Ginny nodded. "And Theo?" Hermione sighed again. "Draco once called Theo and my relationship public, but not real. I see that now." "What do you mean?" "Theo and I, we hide things," Hermione said. "We don't hide everything, just everything that matters." She sighed, looking into her mug, swirl of foam. "There is so much Theo doesn't know. Merlin, everything was such a mess. And Theo has secrets too." She thought of the owl the night before, the shuttered look in Theo's green eyes. Ginny was grinning now.
By your gods, Malfoy is going to be revolting.
Hermione bit her lip. I don't see how dating Draco publicly can end well, Gin. All my friends, except for your Neville, hate him. His family hates my very existence. The press will have a field day.
Ginny shrugged again. Maybe it will burn out quickly, and you can go back to disliking each other and move on.
The idea of moving on from Malfoy, of seeing dislike and indifference in his eyes once more, caused a physical pain in her chest. The looks he'd given Astoria and Lavender turned toward her.
Hermione! Ginny yelled. Hermione!
Hermione blinked and found herself standing, wand in her hand, magic crackling. She stared at Ginny wide-eyed. What happened?
You went spat, that's what happened.
Ginny jumped up and gently lowered Hermione's arm.
Sit down, Hermione, before you spill your chocolate. Merlin, watch your hair trigger reflex. I promise I won't say anything like that again. Sit down.
Hermione sat down again. I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening to me.
It's peas in a pot, you two are,
Ginny said, sitting behind her.
Such an intensity. Okay now? All right, let's breathe.
They sat and breathed for a time, and Hermione recovered enough to ask Ginny about Blaise. Ginny sighed.
It's complicated. Not like you and Malfoy, thank Godric, but still difficult to navigate. He was quite upset with me earlier this week.
How could you tell? Hermione asked.
He frowned slightly and didn't kiss my hand when he left.
Mercy, Hermione said. Ginny kicked off her shoes and turned her body to face Hermione, pulling her legs up under her.
Blaise wants me to spend Christmas in Italy with him.
Hermione's jaw dropped. It's barely Halloween.
When I explained I couldn't leave my family, that it was our first Christmas without Fred.
Ginny sighed.
I think I was supposed to be overwhelmed by the honor or something.
Ginny's tone was a bit resentful. She'd always borne her family's limited means more gracefully than Ron, and as the only girl, she had suffered less from it. The Weasley's actions in the war had advanced Arthur's career considerably. With only Ginny at Hogwarts now, Arthur and Molly were in solid shape. Still, it wasn't like the family had villas on the continent, and Ginny was understandably sensitive about some aspects of dating an indecently wealthy Slytherin. Now she was fingering a diamond earring and frowning.
That's not a problem, though, she continued. Visiting his castle over Christmas sounds real. The place doesn't really feel real. He always says and does the perfect thing, hides all his feelings. I can't get at him.
I haven't heard of Blaise with anyone else this year, Hermione said.
Neither have I, but then he'd make sure of that. He never pushes, but he's always there somehow, fully in control of every situation.
Hermione sighed. Draco does that too. The always there part, I mean. Ginny snickered.
Yeah, Draco is a hot mess with a thin veneer of Slytherin corners. The only time Blaise shows any heat is when we're shagging.
Ginny, Hermione asked, what is it that you want?
I need him to open up to me, I guess, Ginny said. I need to know there's something there, something worth fighting for, the way you fight for Malfoy. Look at Fleur, for example. She was so beautiful and confident and shining that we all doubted she really cared for Bill beyond his looks. We didn't think there was anything else to her. It took Bill's werewolf bite to show how wrong we were.
The two women sat in silence, listening to the fire crackle. It's on Blaise, then, Hermione said finally. You're not Lavender or Astoria, caring only about the surface. He'll have to show the real man, or you'll have no reason to stay.
What if he can't? Ginny whispered. What if this all he has to offer?
Hermione took her hands. Then at least you'll know. You'll find someone better.
Do you think there's more to him?
Perhaps. Hermione looked down at their clasped hands. He claims to care about Draco. According to him, he and Pansy have been working behind the scenes for him.
Maybe I should.
Ginny began, and a noise at the portrait hall made them look up. A long leg came through, followed by the rest of Neville, who tottered a bit as he straightened.
Neville?
Hermione said, jumping to her feet. Her friend was completely dishevelled, his hair stuck up in all directions, his robes unfastened and shirt untucked.
Hello, Devil, said Ginny. You and Lavinia Clark get on well.
Neville said, attempting some dignity despite lipstick smears on his cheeks and collar, not to mention his still heated hazel eyes.
"What's up with you two?"
"Hermione's leaving Theo for Malfoy," Ginny said. Neville nodded.
"They're taking bets in Hufflepuff House. The first years have a board."
"Ginny might break up with Blaise unless he proves he's a human being," Hermione said.
"Quite sensible,"
Neville said.
"Well, if you will excuse me."
He edged towards the stairs. Hermione now noticed the lipstick stain streaking down his shirt. Dark red lipstick. Hermione moved quickly, stepping between Neville and the stairs. "Have something to tell us, Longbottom? Perhaps I'm not the only one who's reconciled with a former bully?" Ginny's eyes widened.
"Oh, no, it couldn't be."
Neville groaned.
"Parkinson?" she asked. "I saw you two at the ruffle table, but—" "Hermione said Pansy loved plants."
Neville rubbed a hand through his already mussed dark hair. "I'm still waiting for my thank you," Hermione said with a Malfoy smirk. Neville looked down at his shirt and flushed slightly.
"So, congratulations on both your epiphanies, and if you two will excuse me—"
He edged towards the stairs again.
"Oh, no, you don't!"
Ginny cried, lunging for him. He dragged Neville onto the sofa, and Hermione sat on his legs to keep him there.
"All right, Longbottom,"
Ginny said wickedly.
"Tell us everything." "It's mad you are."
Neville tried to free himself, but growing up with brothers had made Ginny freakishly strong. "Start talking," Hermione said, grinning, "or I'll tell you how Ernie saw my bra."
"Oh, yes, do tell," Ginny said to her. "You still owe me that story."
"Well, I was in the ground floor storage space with Theo, and he—"
"We started talking at the festival,"
Neville cried desperately, still struggling against Ginny.
"Pansy said her potted gladioli kept dying, but she was sure I had the answer." "Gladioli?"
Ginny said with zest. "What do gladioli mean?" Hermione asked. That was it. She was memorizing that wretched language of flowers pamphlet Bluebell had forced onto them.
"You can't be serious,"
Neville said to Ginny.
"No, just no."
"Gladioli symbolize infatuation," Ginny said. "What colour flowers did she say she had?"
"Red and white,"
Neville said, blushing.
"Can I get up now?"
"What?" Hermione asked Ginny, ignoring him. Ginny's eyes were sparkling.
"Parkinson wants to take Neville's innocence."
He stroked his neck.
"She wants to sully that untouched—" "I am not untouched,"
Neville squeaked.
"Not anymore," Ginny said. "How far down does that lipstick go?"
she asked, tugging at his shirt.
"Hermione,"
Neville begged.
"help me."
"You're right, Neville," said Hermione, patting his legs. "It doesn't mean anything. Slytherins always keep red flowers in their rooms." Neville scowled.
"I'm not saying another word."
So you finally figured out he was being too agreeable?" Hermione started up again. "He grabbed my shirt and tore—"
"Don't!"
Neville cried.
"I'd hold her to make sure the bulbs weren't too big and to put gravel in the bottom of the pots, and she said—"
Neville stopped and flushed again. "All my buttons were undone and Theo's hand was just—" Neville's eyes were screwed shut.
"She said that wasn't the problem. She likely needed a bigger— Oh, Merlin!"
His face reddened further.
"I need to transfer out of Hogwarts, preferably to an all-boys school."
"Nonsense," Ginny said bracingly. "Show little Gryffindor courage. How did you end up like this tonight?" She sniffed him. "I smell outrageously expensive perfume."
"I left Slughorn's party early so I could take her to see my winkweed,"
Neville said. "Is that what the kids are calling it these days?" Ginny said. Hermione was horrified. "You didn't. You took her to see that monster."
"It's not a monster,"
Neville protested.
"It's just protective."
"It's a holy terror," Hermione snapped. Neville sighed.
"It didn't like Pansy touching me."
"Merlin," Hermione breathed. "Is Parkinson all right?"
"Of course she's all right,"
Neville said indignantly. Ginny backed off and let him sit up.
"I threatened it with an icy frost that would freeze its leaf and snap its branches. The poor darling lashed out at Pansy with its vines, and I had to conjure icicles to pin them down. Don't worry," he added. "The vines were fine."
"Nice, Neville," Ginny said approvingly. "Take a witch to see a homicidal plant so you can protect her in a virile way. Well done."
"Wendy is not homicidal,"
Neville cried. "It certainly is," Hermione said.
All those winkweeds should be incendiated.
We've come far afield, Ginny said. What I want to know is, how did Parkinson show her gratitude?
Neville's face was brick red.
Tell on, Ginny, now.
That's it, Neville snapped, getting up. I'm not saying any more. Hermione can blab about her private life all she wants, and frankly, I'm surprised at you, Hermione. But I'm finished.
This isn't over,
Ginny called as Neville practically ran up the stairs. Hermione huffed. Some Gryffindor he was.
As for you,
Ginny's gaze swung on Hermione.
I want to hear more about that storage room, and what you and Malfoy were talking about all cozied up on that sofa tonight, and what the hell Astoria was wearing.
Hermione groaned and put her mug aside. Then we'll need something stronger than chocolate. To be continued. Next up, Draco and Lavender both cause trouble, and Luna is educational. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Gloriana Set by ThebeMoon. If you'd like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, AO3 or Spotify.